The most dangerous thing you can do in Silicon Valley isn't crashing a production server or leaking a trade secret. It is assuming that the woman standing quietly in the corner, wearing a hoodie and looking exhausted, is there to serve you coffee. Especially when she is actually the one who wrote the code that runs your entire world. Before we dive deeper into this absolute masterclass of karma, let me know in the comments, what city or country are you watching this from? I love seeing how far these stories travel. The automatic doors of the San Francisco Marriott Marquis slid open, hitting me with a blast of recycled air that smelled faintly of expensive lilies, floor wax, and high-stakes desperation. It was a specific scent profile I associated with every tech conference I'd attended over the last 2 years. I was running on exactly 3 hours of sleep, fresh off a red-eye flight from Zurich that had been delayed twice, and fueled by a strict diet of lukewarm water and stale airline pretzels. I wasn't wearing my usual armor. There was no tailored Italian blazer, no heels sharp enough to puncture a fragile ego, and no sleek, intimidating blowout. Instead, I was sporting a charcoal gray hoodie, nondescript black leggings, and a pair of running shoes that had definitely seen better days. My luggage, containing the power suit I was supposed to be wearing for the pre-event VIP mixer, was currently enjoying a scenic tour of a baggage carousel in Denver, thanks to a spectacular airline mix-up. I looked less like Dr. Lena Korhonen, the keynote speaker of the Global Innovation Summit, and more like a computer science grad student who had just rolled out of a dorm room during finals week, questioning her life choices. I adjusted the strap of my laptop bag, digging it into my shoulder. It was the only thing of value I had on me, containing the only copy of the speech I was about to give. I walked toward the check-in desk, my mind already rehearsing the opening lines of my keynote on algorithmic ethics and the erosion of digital privacy. I was in the zone. I was calculating the pacing, the dramatic pauses, and the exact moment I would drop the statistics that usually made the C-suite executives in the front row squirm in their expensive leather chairs. "Hey you. Yeah, you." The voice was nasally, loud, and dripped with the kind of unearned confidence that usually comes from being 22 and having a father who golfs with the hiring manager. It cut through my mental rehearsal like a chainsaw. I stopped and turned slowly. Standing there was a young man who looked like he had been manufactured in a factory that specialized in generic finance brothers. He was wearing a navy blue suit that was a shade too bright, brown shoes that were aggressively pointy, and a lanyard name tag that hung crookedly from his lapel. He was checking his watch, a bulky, gold-colored thing that looked heavy enough to anchor a small yacht, and tapping his foot with a rhythmic, impatient clatter against the marble floor. I looked around, assuming he was shouting at a bellhop, a concierge, or perhaps a friend he had lost in the crowd. But we were the only 2 people standing in that specific stretch of polished flooring between the revolving entrance and the elevators. "Me?" I asked, my voice raspy and dry from the flight. "Yes, you. Finally." "I've been waiting for 10 minutes, he snapped, rolling his eyes as if my mere existence was a personal affront to his schedule. He gestured frantically at a cluster of silver hardshell suitcases stacked next to him. "Grab my bags, driver. The car is out front, right? Black SUV. I'm already late for the VIP mixer, and if I miss the opening networking hour, my boss is going to kill me." I stared at him. The sheer processing power required to understand what was happening took a moment to boot up. He thought I was his Uber driver or a private car service. He saw a woman in a hoodie, no makeup, standing near the door, and his brain, clearly running on a deprecated operating system filled with bugs, had categorized me as service staff. "I'm not," I started to say, intending to politely correct him. I was going to say, "I'm not your driver, I'm actually the reason you're here." He cut me off with a sharp hand wave, a dismissal so casual and practiced it was almost impressive. "Save the excuses. Just load the trunk and be careful with the carry-on. It has my laptop in it. Unlike you, I actually have work to do." Something in my chest clicked. It was a cold, metallic sound. It was the sound of the nice Lena protocol shutting down and the executive Lena defensive systems coming online. I looked at his face. He wasn't even looking at me anymore. He was scrolling through his phone, likely checking crypto prices or texting a frat brother about how much he was going to crush this conference. He picked up the smallest bag, a leather messenger satchel, and literally tossed it at me. It wasn't a handoff. It wasn't a pass. It was a throw. I caught it by reflex, clutching the cool leather against my chest. The audacity was physical. It had weight. Chop, chop, he muttered, not looking up from his screen. I don't tip for slowness. The lobby seemed to go quiet. The ambient noise of the hotel, the rolling wheels of suitcases, the distant clinking of glassware, faded into a dull buzz. A few people near the concierge desk turned their heads. I saw a woman in a sharp business suit pause her coffee cup halfway to her mouth, her eyes widening as she processed the scene. She looked at him, then at me. She seemed to sense the energy shift, the static electricity building in the air like a thunderstorm about to break. I held the bag. I looked at the monogram embossed on the flap, Beat J. Bradley. Brad. Brent. It didn't matter. He was no longer a person. He was a variable in an equation I was about to solve with extreme prejudice. I didn't say a word. I didn't correct him. I didn't scream, "Do you know who I am?" The refuge of the insecure. Instead, I let a calm, icy silence settle over me. It's a trick I learned in boardrooms filled with men who interrupt me. Silence is louder than shouting if you hold it long enough. He finally looked up, annoyed that I hadn't moved. "What is your problem? Do you not speak English?" "The car. Go." I looked him dead in the eye. I didn't blink. I channeled every ounce of authority I had earned over 20 years in Silicon Valley. Every patent I held, every piece of legislation I had helped draft, every billion-dollar exit strategy one had negotiated. I let him see the intelligence behind the exhaustion. For a split second, a flicker of doubt crossed his face. His reptilian brain sensed a predator, but his conscious brain was too blinded by bias to interpret the signal. "Fine," I said softly. I turned around, holding his bag. Finally, he huffed, grabbing the handles of his two large rolling suitcases. "Lead the way." I walked toward the revolving doors, the path a driver would take. But at the last second, I veered sharply to the left toward a heavy security access door, the one discreetly marked authorized personnel only. I knew the layout of this hotel. I'd keynote here 3 years ago. "Hey, where are you going?" "The exit is that way," he shouted, his voice rising in confusion. I didn't look back. I fished my phone out of my pocket and swiped my temporary digital pass, which I had downloaded while waiting for my lost luggage, against the reader. The light turned green with a cheerful beep. I pushed through the door into the employee corridor, clutching his leather messenger bag tight. The heavy door swung shut behind me, engaging the magnetic lock with a resonant, heavy thud, instantly cutting off his confused shouting. I stood there in the quiet, carpeted hallway used by staff and VIPs to bypass the crowds. I looked down at his bag. I wasn't stealing it. Oh no, I was simply securing it. I walked down the hallway toward the freight elevator that led to the executive suites. I could hear the faint, muffled sound of him banging on the security door from the other side. "Open up. You have my bag." "Hey." I pulled out my phone and texted the event director. "Sarah, I'm here." Came in through the back. Had a slight issue with a confused attendee in the lobby. "I'll explain later. Also, I have a hostage, asterisk." I smiled for the first time that day. The exhaustion evaporated, replaced by the adrenaline of the hunt. He wanted me to handle his baggage? Fine. I was going to handle it. I was going to handle it in front of 3,000 people. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the penthouse floor. As the doors closed, I whispered to the empty car, "Buckle up, Beat J." The freight elevator hummed smoothly, a stark contrast to the chaotic energy of the lobby I'd just left behind. I leaned back against the polished metal wall, BEJ's sleek leather bag still clutched in my hand. It smelled of cheap cologne and desperation. Curiosity got the better of me. I wasn't going to snoop through his personal digital life. I have ethics, after all, but the external pockets were fair game. I unbuckled the front flap. A stack of business cards tumbled out. Asterisk Brad T. Jenkins. Visionary. Disruptor. Growth hacker. I monetize mindsets. Asterisk. I actually laughed out loud. I monetize mindsets. It sounded like something an AI trained exclusively on LinkedIn influencer hustle posts would generate. Below the text was a QR code that I assumed led to a portfolio of regurgitated crypto advice. The elevator dinged, opening onto the 40th floor, the VIP staging area. The atmosphere here was rarefied air. The carpet was thicker. The lighting was warm and golden. The sound of the city below was entirely absent. Sarah, the event director, was pacing near the registration table, looking at her tablet with the intensity of a bomb disposal expert. When she saw me, her shoulders instantly dropped 3 inches. "Lena," she exhaled, rushing over. She stopped just short of hugging me, respecting the professional boundary, but the relief in her eyes was palpable. "Thank God. The airline tracker said your bags were in Denver, and I was about to send a stylist to the nearest Nordstrom to buy out the store for you." "Denver is lovely this time of year," I said dryly, shifting the strange man's bag to my other shoulder. "But I think I'll manage. I have a backup outfit in my carry-on backpack, assuming that wasn't lost, too." Sarah frowned, looking at the messenger bag. "Is that yours? It doesn't look like your style." "This?" I patted Brad's bag. "This is collateral." Ran into a bit of a situation downstairs. Some young man mistook me for his driver and insisted I take his bag, so I did. Sarah's eyes went wide. "You're joking." "I wish." "He threw it at me, Sarah. Literally threw it." Sarah's face hardened. She was a veteran of these events. She had seen every type of ego the tech world could produce. "Point him out to me. I'll have his badge revoked before he gets through security." "No," I said quickly, raising a hand. "Absolutely not. Do not touch him. Let him in. Let him sit anywhere he wants." "Lena," she warned, a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "What are you planning?" "I'm planning a teachable moment," I said. "Just keep this bag here at the desk for me. If anyone comes looking for a stolen bag belonging to a Brad, tell them it was turned in by security and is being held for verification. Make him sweat." I handed the bag over to her assistant, who handled it like it was radioactive. "I need a shower and 10 minutes of silence before I have to be the Lena," I said, straightening my hoodie. "Right this way," Sarah said, guiding me down the hall. As we walked, we passed the VIP lounge. Through the glass doors, I could see the titans of the industry. There was the CEO of the largest chip manufacturer in the world, sipping espresso. There was the founder of that new quantum computing startup, frantically typing on a tablet. As I walked past, heads turned. Despite my hoodie, despite the lack of makeup, they knew. "Lena." The chip CEO waved, standing up. "I read your white paper on neural drifting last week. Brilliant stuff. We need to talk about the regulation chapter." I smiled, waving back. "Catch me after the keynote, David. I'm currently undercover." He laughed, confused but charmed. This was the dichotomy of my life. To the people who actually built things, I was a peer, a mentor, an authority. To the Brads of the world, who saw only surface-level markers of status, suits, watches, loud voices, I was invisible. Or worse, I was servitude. I entered the private green room assigned to me. It was nicer than my apartment. A fruit basket the size of a shrub sat on the table. Beside it lay a small, heavy envelope made of cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing. I opened it. My credentials. Lena K., keynote speaker. Access, all areas/universal, ***. I clipped the heavy laminate badge to my hoodie. It felt like putting on a shield. Meanwhile, 40 floors below, I knew exactly what was happening. Brad was likely screaming at the front desk. He was probably berating a minimum wage employee about the incompetence of the driver. He was digging his hole deeper, shovel by shovel. I looked in the mirror. The tired traveler was about to vanish. The shark was about to arrive. And Brad? Brad had no idea he was already bleeding in the water. I stepped into the private ensuite bathroom, letting the door click shut behind me. The shower was a waterfall-style fixture, and as the hot water hit my skin, I felt the physical weight of the last 24 hours begin to dissolve. The recycled airplane air, the stale pretzel dust, the sheer exhaustion of the delay, it all swirled down the drain. I stood there for a long time, eyes closed, letting the steam clear my sinuses and, more importantly, my head. When I stepped out, wrapped in a plush hotel robe, I felt like a blank slate. I moved to my backpack, the only luggage that hadn't decided to vacation in Colorado, and pulled out my backup protocol. It wasn't the tailored Italian suit currently spinning on a carousel in Denver, but it was effective. A severe, high-collared black turtleneck and wide-legged trousers that draped with architectural precision. Minimalist. Sharp. It was very Steve Jobs, if Steve Jobs had actually cared about fabric quality. I pulled my hair back, twisting it into a tight, severe bun at the nape of my neck. No stray hairs. No softness. I applied a layer of crimson lipstick, wore paint, and looked in the mirror. The tired traveler who had been bullied in the lobby was gone. The shark had arrived. I picked up my phone and opened the event app. It was time to see where my prey fit into this ecosystem. I typed Brad Jenkins into the search bar. The results loaded instantly. Brad T. Jenkins. Panelist. Session. Growth Hacking the Future. Disrupting Traditional Hierarchies. Time. 2 p.m. Location. Hall B. I actually laughed out loud. Disrupting traditional hierarchies. The irony was so rich it was practically caloric. I checked the time, it was just past noon. I had 2 hours before I needed to be anywhere officially. 2 hours to let Brad simmer in the juices of his own panic. 2 hours to prepare the verbal scalpel I was going to use to dissect him. I texted Sarah, make sure I have a seat for the 2 p.m. panel in Hall B. In the back. Unobtrusive, *. Her reply came instantly, bouncing with digital anxiety, *, done. But you're on the main stage at 4 o'clock. Are you sure you want to waste time on the undercard, *. I typed back, I need to do some market research on the current state of incompetence. I didn't stay in the green room. I get restless before a speech. I need to feel the pulse of the building, hear the hum of the crowd. So, with my credentials tucked discreetly inside my blazer pocket, hiding the keynote ribbon from view, I headed up to the mezzanine level. The mezzanine was a semi-private balcony overlooking the main convention floor, a glass-walled perch usually populated by serious investors looking to escape the noise of the startup booths below. I ordered a sparkling water with lime and leaned against the railing, watching the ants swarm. The convention floor was a kaleidoscope of neon banners, massive LED screens, and thousands of people desperate to be noticed. Excuse me, is this seat taken? I stiffened. I knew that voice. The nasal whine was unmistakable. I turned slowly, swirling the ice in my glass. Brad was there. He looked frazzled. His tie was slightly askew, and a sheen of sweat coated his forehead. He was clutching a new bag, a cheap, bright orange canvas tote he must have picked up from a vendor booth. He looked like he'd been through a war. He stopped dead when he saw me. His eyes narrowed, scanning my face. He clearly recognized me as the driver, but the context confused him. I was standing in the VIP mezzanine, drinking a $12 water, wearing sleek black clothes that cost more than his car. But prejudice is a powerful drug. Instead of recalibrating, his brain scrambled to find a logic that fit his worldview. You, he said, pointing a finger that trembled slightly. What are you doing here? Did you get fired? Is that why you ran off? I took a slow, deliberate sip of my water. Hello, Brad. Enjoying the conference. He blinked, thrown off by my use of his name. Then he scoffed, puffing out his chest. Don't act like you know me. I had to report you to hotel management. They're looking for you. You stole my property. I secured an unattended bag left with unauthorized personnel. I corrected him calmly, my voice smooth as glass. I believe it's at the registration desk. Lost and found. He flushed a deep, blotchy red. You put my bag in lost and found? Do you know how embarrassing that was? I had to describe my laptop stickers to a woman named Brenda for 20 minutes. Sounds tedious, I said. Maybe next time, carry your own bags. He stepped closer, invading my personal space. Listen, lady. I don't know how you snuck up here, probably cleaning the tables or something, but you need to watch your tone. I am a speaker at this event. He tapped his badge aggressively. It was a standard speaker badge, the kind given to hundreds of panelists. That's impressive, I said, my voice flat. Yeah, it is, he sneered. I'm on the growth hacking panel. I'm shaping the industry. What are you doing? Refilling the water coolers. Just then, a heavy boofall approached us. Lena. We both turned. Approaching us was a small delegation from the Department of Defense's AI Research Unit. Leading them was General Morris, a man I've worked with on several classified ethics boards. He was a man who commanded rooms simply by walking into them, wearing a uniform decorated with enough brass to set off a metal detector from 10 feet away. General Morris, I said, ignoring Brad completely. I extended a hand. I was hoping we'd run into you before the keynote. Lena, the general boomed, shaking my hand with a grip that could crush coal into diamonds. We have some questions about that paper you published on autonomous decision variances. The Pentagon is concerned. Variances are only a risk if the oversight parameters are ignored, I said, locking eyes with him. Which, knowing your contractors, is a valid concern. The general laughed, a deep, gravelly sound. That's why we need you, Lena. Always the sharpest knife in the drawer. Brad was standing there, his mouth slightly open. He looked from the general in full uniform to me, and back to the general. His brain was misfiring. I could see the gears grinding, stripping their teeth. I'm sorry, Brad interrupted, desperate to regain control of the narrative. General, you know this woman? General Morris turned to look at Brad. His expression shifted instantly from warm respect to the kind of look one gives a cockroach on a restaurant floor. This woman, the general repeated, his voice dropping an octave. This is Dr. Lena Korhonen. She's the reason half the systems in this building are secure. Who are you? Brad paled. I am Brad. I'm a speaker. Growth hacking. The general turned back to me, dismissing Brad entirely. Anyway, Lena, are you free for dinner later? Love to pick your brain. I'll check my schedule, General, I said, keeping my eyes on Brad. Brad backed away. She's probably his assistant, he muttered under his breath, barely audible, clearly needing to vocalize the lie to believe it. Yeah, consultant, right? Probably just takes notes. He turned and hurried away toward the bar, needing a drink to wash down the cognitive dissonance. I checked my watch. 1:45 p.m. Excuse me, General. I have a panel to attend. Apparently, there's some cutting-edge thought leadership on growth hacking that I simply cannot miss. Hall B was a windowless cavern that smelled of stale coffee and aggressive air conditioning. It was set up for about 200 people, but only about 40 chairs were occupied. I slipped into the very last row, pulling my blazer tight around me. Brad was sitting on a high stool in the center of the stage, flanked by two other young men who looked like clones of him, just with different vest colors. He had grabbed the microphone as if it were a baton in a relay race he was winning. Great question, he boomed, his voice echoing too loudly in the half-empty room. But I think sustainable is a trap. It's a legacy mindset. We don't want sustainable. We want explosive. We want to break things. If you're not breaking things, you're not building. He looked around the room expecting applause. He got a cough. At my startup, he continued, leaning forward and man-spreading on the stool, we don't have employees. We have ninjas. We don't have meetings. We have collisions. It's about flattening the hierarchy. The old guard, the dinosaurs, they're too slow. They're obsessed with ethics and compliance. I felt a muscle twitch in my jaw. Obsessed with ethics, he said it like it was a slur. Let me give you an example, Brad went on. I had an interaction today. A classic example of the service mindset versus the owner mindset. I had to deal with let's call her a logistics provider. She was slow. She was confused. She didn't understand urgency. That's the problem with the workforce today. No hustle. If you're not running, you're dead. He was talking about me. He was using his abuse of me as a parable for his business acumen. Alpha energy isn't toxic, Brad declared, raising a finger. It's efficient. I took out my notepad, an actual paper notepad, and wrote down, *alpha energy isn't toxic. It's efficient. Jenkins, 2:15 p.m. A young woman sitting 2 seats away from me leaned over to her friend. Is he serious? Logistics provider? He sounds like a sociopath. Her friend whispered back, "Sounds like every guy who's ever tried to explain Bitcoin to me at a bar." I smiled behind my hand. The audience wasn't buying it. But then, the woman next to me shifted. She glanced at me, then did a double take. She looked at my profile, then down at the phone in her lap. I saw her screen. She had the conference website open. My face was on the banner. She looked back at me, her eyes widening to the size of saucers. "Wait," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Are you?" I turned to her and put a single finger to my lips. "Shoo." She gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. She nudged her friend violently. "It's her," she hissed. "It's Lena Korhonen. She's sitting right there." The friend looked. "No way. Why would she be at this panel?" "She's watching him." The first woman whispered, "Oh my God, look at her face. He's dead. He's so dead." The whisper spread. It moved like a wave through the back rows. Asterisk Lena Korhonen is here. She's in the back. She's watching Brad. Asterisk heads started to turn. People stopped looking at the stage and started looking at me. Phones were raised. Brad, up on stage, noticed the shift in attention. He thought they were finally captivated by his brilliance. He stood up and walked to the edge of the stage. "See? You're feeling it," he said, spreading his arms. "That's the energy I'm talking about. Disruption." He had no idea. He was preening for an audience that was currently watching the executioner sharpen her axe. I stood up quietly. I had enough material. The alpha energy quote was the nail in the coffin. I nodded to the two women next to me. They looked at me with a mix of awe and terror. "Enjoy the rest of the show," I whispered. I walked out of the hall. The air in the corridor felt cleaner. I checked the time. 3 p.m. 1 hour until showtime. Brad's panel ended in 10 minutes. He would be heading to the main hall soon, expecting to watch the keynote. He probably thought he could network his way into the VIP section. I headed back to the green room to put on my microphone. It was time to switch from observation to action. The trap was set. Now, I just had to wait for him to walk into it. The main hall was a beast of a venue, a cavernous space designed to make human beings feel small in the presence of technology. It seated 3,000 people, and from where I stood in the wings, the air felt electric, vibrating with the low-frequency hum of ambient bass and the collective murmur of a standing room-only crowd. The lighting was cinematic, deep, oceanic blues and sharp lasers cutting through the manufactured haze. It felt less like a corporate conference and more like a massive concert for people who dream in code. I stood stage left, hidden by the heavy velvet curtains. Mike, the stage manager, adjusted his headset and gave me a thumbs up. 2 minutes, Lena. You look lethal. Killer suit. Thanks, Mike, I murmured, my eyes fixed on the monitors. I peeked through the gap in the curtain. The front row was a sea of expensive blazers and rigid postures, reserved for the diamond-tier attendees and fellow speakers. And there he was. Brad had somehow weaseled his way into a seat in the second row, right near the center aisle. He was beaming, radiating that unearned confidence, chatting up the man next to him, who I recognized as a senior engineer from Google. Brad looked relaxed. He looked like a man who had gotten away with it. He even had his phone out, poised to record the keynote, likely to post it later with a caption about how inspired he was by the disruption of the status quo. The announcer's voice boomed through the massive speaker array, shaking the floorboards beneath my feet. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our keynote speaker. She is a Turing Award nominee, the architect of the SENS protocols, and the CEO of Ethelgard Systems. Please welcome Dr. Lena Korhonen." The applause was thunderous. It wasn't polite, it was physical. It washed over the stage like a tidal wave. I took a deep breath, centering myself. The fatigue from the flight, the hunger, the irritation, it all crystallized into cold, hard focus. I walked out. The blind white spotlights hit me instantly, erasing the back rows from my vision, but illuminating the front sections with terrifying clarity. I walked to the center of the stage, my heels clicking rhythmically on the polished floor. I didn't do the humble wave. I didn't smile. I stood there, center stage, hands clasped loosely behind my back, radiating absolute stillness. The applause began to die down, fading into an expectant hush. I looked down. I found him immediately. Brad was clapping, a polite, networking smile plastered on his face. Then, he really looked at me. I saw the exact moment the neurons connected. I watched the signal travel from his optic nerve to his visual cortex, access the memory of the service staff in the lobby, cross-reference it with the woman commanding the stage, and trigger a catastrophic system failure. His hands stopped moving mid-clap. His mouth fell open, not in a figure of speech, but literally. His jaw unhinged. He squinted, leaning forward as if hoping it was a trick of the light, hoping I was perhaps a twin sister. I locked eyes with him. I tilted my head slightly, just a fraction of an inch, the exact same way I had looked at him in the lobby when he threw the bag at my chest. Recognition slammed into him like a freight train. He turned to the Google engineer next to him and mouthed something that looked like, "That's her." The engineer looked at Brad, then up at me, then back at Brad, pulling away slightly as if he could sense the radioactive panic radiating off the intern. A murmur started in the front rows. The people who had been at the panel, the ones who had seen me sitting in the back taking notes, were whispering. Asterisk, that's her. She was at his panel. She heard everything. Oh my God, look at his face, asterisk. The whispers grew louder. It wasn't the usual buzz of excitement. It was the delicious, terrifying sound of social execution. Brad started to sink in his chair, physically trying to collapse his skeleton to fit inside his suit. He pulled his jacket collar up. He glanced at the exit sign, glowing green 100 yards away through a dense crowd. He was trapped. I stepped up to the microphone. The silence in the room was absolute. 3,000 people holding their breath. I let the silence hang for 5 full seconds. 10 seconds. It became uncomfortable. It became heavy. Perception, I said. My voice was crisp, amplified to godlike proportions by the line array speakers. Perception is a funny thing. We build our world based on pattern recognition. We see a suit, we think success. We see a hoodie, we think slacker. We see a woman standing in a lobby, and we think. I paused. I let the word hang there, suspended in the cool air. Help. Brad flinched as if I'd slapped him. Today, I want to talk about the errors in our algorithms, I continued, walking slowly to the edge of the stage, looming over the second row. Not just in our code, but in our culture. Because sometimes the data is right in front of you, but your bias creates a blind spot that can cost you everything. The audience was hooked. They didn't know the full story yet, but they knew they were watching blood sport. I took the clicker from the podium. Let's begin. Before we dive into the new heuristic models for neural networks, I want to share a piece of field data I collected this morning. Right here. In the Marriott lobby. I clicked the remote. The massive screen behind me turned black. Then, a single word appeared in stark, white text: assumptions. We teach our AI models to categorize. Is this a cat or a dog? Is this a tumor or a shadow? Is this a threat or a friend? But what happens when the training data is corrupted by arrogance? I stopped directly in front of Brad's section. I wasn't looking at him anymore. That would be too obvious. I was looking just above his head, but everyone in his blast radius felt the heat. I arrived today tired. I was wearing leggings. I was standing near the door. And a young man, let's call him the disruptor, approached me. A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. The disruptor didn't see a keynote speaker. He didn't see a human being. He saw a function. He saw a mechanism to move his luggage from point A to point B. I clicked the remote again. A slide appeared showing a stock photo of a generic, angry businessman yelling at a phone. He threw his bag at me, I said. The audience gasped, a collective, sharp intake of breath. Literally threw it. And he commanded me to drive him. When I hesitated, he didn't question his assumption. He doubled down. He questioned my competence. He questioned my language skills. Boo, someone shouted from the back. Now, I continued, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, I could have corrected him. I could have said, "Sir, I am Dr. Lena Korhonen, and I have more patents than you have years on this earth." Cheers erupted. A few people stood up. But I didn't. Because I wanted to see how far the error would propagate. I wanted to see the runtime of his ignorance. So, I took his bag. I clicked the remote. The screen changed to the photo I had taken in the elevator, a high-resolution close-up of the leather messenger bag with the monogram Beat J. Brad let out a small, strangled sound. He was holding his head in his hands. I took the bag to a secure location, I said. And then, being a diligent researcher, I decided to observe the disruptor in his natural habitat. I went to a panel this afternoon. A panel on growth hacking. I pulled my small paper notepad out of my blazer pocket. I took notes. There was a fascinating hypothesis presented. Quote, asterisk, alpha energy isn't toxic. It's efficient. Asterisk. The room exploded. Laughter, groans, jeers. It was deafening. Efficiency, I mused, putting the notebook away. Is it efficient to alienate the person who controls the stage you are hoping to climb onto? Is it efficient to treat people like furniture until you realize they have a title you respect? I walked back to the podium and gripped the sides, staring out into the darkness. This industry is full of brilliant minds, but it is also rotting with this specific kind of decay, the idea that you are the main character and everyone else is an NPC. We are building AI that will reshape humanity. If the people building it cannot distinguish between a peer and a servant, we are doomed. I looked down at Brad. He was staring at his knees, shaking. So, to the disruptor, I said, raising a hand. Whoever you are, wherever you are sitting. I saw people around him turning. They knew. The radius of realization was collapsing in on him. Fingers were pointing. Thank you for the data, I said coldly. You have provided a perfect dataset for what we need to delete from our source code. I clicked the remote. The screen changed to my actual presentation title, Ethics AS and Operating System. Now, I said, my tone shifting to pure business, let's talk about the future. I launched into my speech. For 45 minutes, I held them in the palm of my hand. But the undercurrent was there. Every time I used the word blind spot or bias, 3,000 heads turned slightly toward the second row. Brad sat there the whole time. He couldn't leave. Leaving would be admitting guilt. He had to sit there and take it. He had to endure the longest 45 minutes of his life. The Q&A session was where the final blow landed. A young woman in the balcony asked how to change the culture when people like the disruptor get funded. We stopped tolerating it, I answered. We stopped thinking arrogance is a proxy for competence. And we stopped letting them in the room. I looked down at the second row. Brad looked up at me. He looked like a cornered animal, a mix of fear and strange, desperate defiance in his eyes. He stood up. He didn't have a microphone, but he had that projecting frat house voice. This is a misunderstanding, he shouted, his voice cracking. You're making me look like a villain for a simple mistake. I didn't know who you were. The crowd gasped. He had outed himself. And that, I said into my microphone, my voice drowning him out effortlessly, is exactly the problem. You treat people with respect only when you know who they are. That isn't respect. That's a transaction. I'm a speaker here. Brad yelled, stepping into the aisle. I have a right to be here. You stole my bag. Security, I said. I didn't shout. I spoke it calmly, like I was ordering a latte. Two large men in black suits, who had been hovering near the side of the stage, moved instantly. They were professional, swift, and looked very tired of people like Brad. I'm a VIP. Brad sputtered as the first guard reached him. Get your hands off me. Do you know who my father is? I leaned into the mic, and for those who assume roles based on appearances, I looked directly at the camera streaming to the giant screen. Security, please escort that tourist out. Asterisk tourist, asterisk, Brad screamed as the guards took him by the elbows. I'm a founder. You're a distraction, I said. Goodbye, Brad. The guards lifted him, not literally off the ground, but with enough force that his feet were moving faster than he intended. They marched him up the center aisle. The audience didn't just watch. They started to clap. It started as a slow clap from the back, then grew into a rhythmic, thunderous applause. A farewell cadence. Brad twisted in the guard's grip, looking back at the stage, his face a mask of red fury. He was deleted. He was muted. I watched him disappear through the double doors at the back of the hall. Next question, I said calmly. The room erupted in laughter and cheers. The tension broke. The air felt lighter. By the time I made it back to my hotel suite an hour later, the internet had done what the internet does best. It had weaponized the footage. I kicked off my heels and collapsed onto the sofa, pulling out my phone. Twitter, or X, was melting down. Hashtag tourist in tech was trending #1 globally. I saw a post from the venture capital firm that backed his startup. In light of recent events, Apex Ventures is reviewing our partnership with, translation, he's cooked. My phone buzzed with a call. It was General Morris. Lena, he barked. Just saw the clip. Tourist. Ruthless. I love it. The Pentagon wants you to lead the new oversight committee. They want someone who isn't afraid to throw the baggage out of the room. Literally. I smiled at the ceiling. Send over the paperwork. 3 days later, on the final day of the summit, I returned to the main stage for the closing remarks. I wasn't wearing a suit. Just a sharp leather jacket and jeans. 3 days ago, we had a moment of viral entertainment, I began. But firing one intern doesn't fix the system that created him. I signaled to the screen. A new logo appeared, the Echelon Project. This morning, I liquidated my speaking fee for this event. I matched it with a personal donation of $2 million. The Echelon Project is a full-ride scholarship and incubator fund. But not for the people with the loudest voices. It is for the people in the back of the room. The people who are mistaken for service staff. The people who carry the bags. I pointed to the second row, to the seat where Brad had sat. It was empty. I have reserved that seat, I said. Next year, it won't be empty. It will be occupied by the first recipient of this grant, a young woman named Amani, who is currently working night shifts to pay for her coding bootcamp. I met her in the lobby yesterday. She held the door for me. I smiled. She didn't know who I was. She just did it because she's a decent human being. That is the qualification. I looked out at the sea of faces. One last thing. To anyone watching this who sees themselves in the disruptor, take a breath. Listen more than you speak. And carry your own damn bags. I walked off stage to a standing ovation that felt different than the first one. The first was for a celebrity. This one was for a leader. As I sat in the back of the black car heading to SFO, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Asterisk, I'm sorry. I really am. Brad asterisk. I looked at it for a moment. I considered replying. I considered giving him a piece of advice. Then I pressed block number. Where to, Dr. Korhonen? The driver asked. The airport, I said, tossing my phone into the bag I carried myself. And then the future.